This is a Hot Pie Media original.
All right, everybody knows the term, knows the name, probably knows the logo. I'm not quite sure if you know the backstory. And I think he might say, man, I've written a lot of stuff, and out of that, you pick my writing on Rotten Tomatoes? That's it? That's where we're going? All this important stuff that happens in this country and the world, and I've had these really cool assignments, and you pick Rotten Tomatoes? Yes, I'm picking Rotten Tomatoes because it's pretty freaking interesting from top to bottom. He is Zuylen-Wood, and the story, first of all, the first one is in Wired.com. It's, I suggest that you read it, behind the scenes at Rotten Tomatoes. There, Rotten Tomatoes. Are you kidding? Is Rotten Tomatoes... Were you driving down the road and said, you know, I've heard Rotten Tomatoes, I've followed Rotten Tomatoes, I wonder what Rotten Tomatoes is about and why it's so freaking important? Or did somebody say, hey, Simon, I got an idea for you?
I want to thank you, first of all, for inviting me on to write a story I published like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
I was wondering, actually, your producer reached out and was like, hey, can you come on the show? And I was like, sure, yeah, but I haven't published anything like immediately. Like, am I now just like the New York correspondent?
No, it's just I'm a little jealous. I like to tap into interesting topics, and I was reading through your when I read the story about the guy with the border wall, I stumbled upon
about last month.
Yeah, I stumbled upon the Rotten Tomatoes thing, and I thought,
yeah,
wait a minute.
Yeah.
Nobody knows about Rotten Tomatoes. What is?
I know.
So there's the setup. I know it's old, but I don't think people have. Well, at least my reaction was, yeah. How does that old thing work? Why is it so important?
I kid. I'm delighted. I'm always happy to talk about myself and my work. Are you kidding me? I'm a writer.
Right.
No, it's evergreen too, because everybody still uses Rotten Tomatoes. How did it come to me? Sometimes I get this thought of like my job description as a freelance magazine writer is to write about what interests me. And I think generally readers are more interested in stuff when the writer is interested in the topic. And I've always been bothered by what I see as the atrophying of serious and good and fun film criticism. And there's fewer newspapers that have critics. There's fewer critics that are, I think, doing like longer sort of interesting work. And we're kind of crowdsourcing to Rotten Tomatoes. And then it kind of occurred to me that no one really knows how it works, right? So you see like a red tomato with an 89 next to, I don't know, whatever, Crazy Rich Asians, name a movie. And you think, oh, that's an 89 out of 100. That's a solid B plus, verging on A minus. And then I started looking into it. And anyone who's done like 6 seconds of research on Rotten Tomatoes realizes it actually doesn't mean in any way that it's an 89 out of 100. It means actually that 89% of critics that were hand selected by Rotten Tomatoes gave it what Rotten Tomatoes deemed a positive review. So like 90% of all the critics in the world could have been deemed to have said it was above average. And that confers an 89% onto the movie, which looks way better than 89% of critics saying it was above average. And then layer on top of the fact that it's actually totally subjective. So it's basically just like human curators in the offices in Beverly Hills and Rotten Tomatoes, which is where I was hanging out for like a week, basically deciding, is this a positive or negative review? And so the irony actually is that it's this like, it's basically like a website. It's an aggregator, but it's actually also fundamentally relying on humans and real critics. So it's like a weird mashup of how we used to decide whether to watch movies and how we decide to watch them now. And it's not an algorithm.
Yeah, so I know that. I think we just they put that number out there. So do you find that people trust it?
Yeah.
And should they?
You know what? I'll tell you how I know people trust it. I wrote like thousands of words on why Rotten Tomatoes shouldn't be trusted, and I still consult Rotten Tomatoes before I watch a movie.
Right. I mean, it occurred to me, right? I think this is why you even showed up there, are they the Yelp of movies, or is this some kind of scam?
Right. Yeah. I guess they're the Yelp of movies, but it's like weirdly, it's slightly less democratic, right? So there's 2 scores. So the audience score, and that I think is designated by like a logo of like a popcorn thing that's either like full of popcorn or that's like spilled over, like with like butter spilling out. And that's like, does the audience think it's positive or negative? Then there's the critic score, which is what you really care about. That's the red tomato or the green splat, Rotten Tomato. And so, but it's less straightforward than Yelp, because Yelp is just people saying, and I don't trust Yelp either, by the way, because whatever, I don't know, I don't trust Yelp, but it's basically just Yelp at least is straightforward. We're giving this 4 to 5 stars. It's 4 to 5 stars. With Rotten Tomatoes, there's this other thing that I just mentioned, and it's actually kind of opaque. The other thing is that criticism has changed. So I think critics are easier on movies than they used to be.
Yes.
And I think generally Hollywood movies are on balance probably not as good as they used to be, as a lot of talent has gone to prestige television and streaming. And there's a lot, for my money, there are way too many blockbusters. And so, but critics are softer than they used to be. I remember like 5, 6, I don't know, something years ago, A.O. Scott of the New York Times wrote a pan of the Avengers movie, and Samuel Jackson got really mad at him on Twitter. And I think that A.O. Scott was snake bitten, and like his next Avengers review was like, hey, this was kind of fun. And so now you've gotten to this point where like, if A.O. Scott writes a, hey, this was fun movie about the Avengers, that's a 100%. Even if he's like, this wasn't Casablanca, this wasn't, I don't know, Taxi Driver, he's saying it's a, so if every critic in the world says Avengers was more fun than it was bad, that's 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Right. So people need to know there's people sitting in this office in Beverly Hills, and they are just searching. I mean, they're just like, they're not bots. They are scanning around, seeing what movie critics say. But wasn't there a bunch of criticism? First of all, the question is there a way to justify, does Rotten Tomatoes, whoever it is you talk to there, whoever he or she is, do they say, here's how important we are, we give X number of Rotten Tomatoes, the movie does 40% more business or whatever? I mean, is there a way to justify its existence numerically?
Yeah.
And then the second part is, remember years ago, it was sort of uncovered that the producers, or not producers, those distributing the films would just sort of cherry pick lines from movie critics and say, Jeff Ward says blockbuster. Well, I really said it's a blockbuster piece of crap, but they pulled out. I mean, so I'm wondering, is there not a little bit of a scam element to this?
Well, okay. On the first question, is there any like documentation of like what a Rotten Tomatoes does for your movie? No, I think people have tried to study it, but it's pretty hard to tell. I know that publicity-wise, if you're a studio and you get a certified fresh, which I think is like above 70% on the tomato meter, they'll stick that on billboards. They'll stick that on the back page of newspapers, like you name it, banner ads on the internet. The scam thing, insofar as there could be a conflict of interest anywhere, it's that Rotten Tomatoes is owned by Fandango, and Fandango sells movie tickets for a business, for a living. So if you're Fandango, you're kind of like less inclined to have bad reviews in general, since your whole goal is to get people going to the movies. When I was there, though, I mean, I met
the Rotten Tomatoes is owned by Fandango.
Yes.
Okay.
And Fandango's owned by a movie studio.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I'm saying, is that there's not much reason right there you wouldn't trust it.
Yeah, you could like, if you wanted to be a conspiracy theorist, you would Rotten Tomatoes maybe errs on the side of being nicer than meaner. But the people I met, like they would be doing it subconsciously, I think. I mean, it's a tiny staff. I mean, there's maybe like a dozen or two people there. And they were like, I forget, like maybe fewer than a half dozen main film reviewers. These are guys who just read film reviews all day long. Like you said, they look for them everywhere. It can be anything from the LA Times to like some guy's blog. There's these kind of like troll bloggers out there who actually try to intentionally tank 100% movies because they don't like them. Like I think there was some guy like Frozen or something, or I don't know, La La Land, I forget. Something was at 100 and he was like, this is an injustice. And so like he personally wrote a negative review just to get it to 99%. The point is not that like Frozen or La La Land should have been 100, definitely not. But the point is that because they kind of like pull from like random bloggers sometimes, again, like who are these people? Yeah.
So you're sitting in their offices. I know they're like, and nobody wants to say I don't really matter, but I'm wondering if at some point, like you said, film critics seem to matter less than ever.
Yeah.
Films seem to matter less than ever.
Yeah.
So I know it's their job, and I assume you're going to tell me how it is they make money, but would somebody say, you know what, Simon, I actually probably don't matter that much anymore. There was a day and time. Not now.
Yeah. Well, yes and no, because, yeah, in one way, like everything you said is right. And in another sense, though, if you got rid of all the film critics, there'd be no Rotten Tomatoes, because they're still relying on critics. So there's this kind of like charming analog thing about it, which, like, all things equal, I'll take that over an algorithm. At least they're reading critics to figure out what the critics are saying, however you may feel about criticism, rather than an algorithm basically just saying, hey, you may like this because you already watched this, which isn't really like expanding your aperture at all.
Okay. How does it make money?
Rotten Tomatoes?
Yeah.
I forget. You're testing my memory here. I don't know. Do they? I don't even remember.
I don't know. I read the story. I don't know anywhere. I can't help but wonder now. There's 12 people sitting in Beverly Hills who sit around and drink coffee and read reviews, and then
I think they're basically seen as, like, I think initially, before they were bought by Fandango, and before that, I think they were owned by another movie studio. I think they just basically operated the way any website would. They sold web ads and made money that way. I think they still do that. Now, though, I think Fandango sees them as a marketing tool. So even if they lose money for Fandango, like on a per employee basis, they are still a useful site for Fandango to have in their portfolio, because they can promote all their movies with the Rotten Tomatoes stuff right on the Fandango app, right as you're about to buy a ticket. But otherwise, yeah, I think the way that any news website would make money, right, selling ads.
Were they surprised that you ventured in there and wanted to talk? I mean, were this like, hey, somebody's checking us out for once? Or did they believe that they were really kind of an interesting story?
That's a great question. I'm always surprised when anyone lets me talk to them.
Yeah.
I was surprised they said yes, because, I don't know. I could have gone in and trashed them. And I kind of like, I took some shots at them, and actually their PR person afterwards wrote me back, and I opened the email and I was like, oh no, you never want to get that email where like somebody just tells you all their grievances and then you have to do the damage control. The PR person was like, thank you so much for this like conscientious and like great article. And I'm like, what? Like, I took some shots at you guys. So I give credit to this PR person for being like, hey, you can't win them all. And maybe on some level they liked that I appreciated that they're a little bit more old school than an algorithm.
Almost to completely shift gears, and I'm going to do this to you again, because it seems like you didn't just get into Rotten Tomatoes. It seems like you got into a place that the shadow government, you got in there, or sort of got in there. That's pretty fascinating. So for people that don't know, you've also written a story, and this is probably older too. I can't even see the date on it.
Not that old. It's like a year or two old.
Okay, so this is Mark Zuckerberg is the devil to most people. And you called it the shadow government. Their censors, editor, whatever you want to call them, that back room of people who decide what is hate and what is not hate. How do you describe them, and who are they?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I got access to definitely much more of a kind of gilded cage than Rotten Tomatoes, which was Facebook HQ in Menlo Park, California. That's a whole other story about how the access even came through. And I was shocked because they let me come to Facebook's campus for several weeks and basically sit in with more or less unrestricted access to what I call their shadow government. If you think of the three branches of government that the U.S. has, right? You've got the president and the executive branch. You've got the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court, and then you have the legislative branch, which is Congress. This was the Congress of Facebook. These are the folks that, and there's probably about 25 of them, essentially write Facebook's laws or constitution, whatever metaphor you want to use. Facebook has a rule book. It has a constitution, as I called it, that basically governs what a user can and cannot post on the platform.
Right. It's kind of a content constitution.
Yeah.
These are the content people of Facebook.
That's right. And this is a living, breathing document. This is something that they're constantly adjusting and tweaking, rewriting as the times change, as they come under a ton of criticism. And the people who write this are much more important than people realize. And in some ways, they're more important than a Zuckerberg, because even though Zuckerberg is weighing in on like the kind of PR fires and he's leading the corporate strategy, he's not the one who's determining like, whether so-and-so piece of hate speech was left up too long. He's not the one who's like personally banning you for posting something that was a joke, but that Facebook thought was, bigoted. He's not the one taking down a picture of your, 5-year-old who wasn't wearing a shirt because it flagged the nudity algorithm. These are the things that are basically being determined by the shadow government.
What is there? Is there a real name for them at the company?
Yes, they are called the content policy team.
Okay,
something a little more boring.
Yeah. Do they?
Yeah.
I couldn't figure this out. Is that their job? They show up to work every day and debate whether, what is it you said, men suck or men are trash or men are scum?
Yeah.
Whether men are saying men are scum should be allowed. Is that what they do every day? That's their job.
It's actually a fascinating job. And these people are fascinating. Most of them come from the public sector. These are folks that worked as like DOJ lawyers. They worked as foreign policy wonks in the Obama administration. A lot of them were kind of refugees from the Obama administration, who after Trump won, didn't want or couldn't work in the public sector anymore, and basically did the next big thing, which is work for like the global business that governs 1 billion of us. Arguably, it has more power than the Trump administration ever did. And they're rewriting speech rules for the internet. We're also in a moment. I'll talk about the men are scum thing in a second because that's really interesting. But we're in a moment where like the nature of censorship and free speech and free expression is constantly being debated. There's a lot of people who feel like we're too stifled. There are people who think that like hate is running amok. This speech is a super third rail issue right now. And Facebook is often at the center of it because it's basically a Rorschach test for however you think. A lot of people on the right think they're being censored. A lot of people on the left think it's like this dumpster fire of bigotry. And so everybody's coming at it from different angles, but blaming Facebook essentially for being the town square that like is out of control. The men are scum issue in the wake of the Me Too movement.
Let me stop you there about the dynamics of this team. So there's 25 of them. They go to work every day.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they go to their little space. They all get together in that room. And did you get access while they were debating?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're sitting there going around the table, y'all, men and scum's that's not that bad. Then somebody else says, oh, come on, you can't say that. And then, so they just go around and they take a vote and go, okay, that phrase is out. And then the other part is, John McClellan is the co-founder and creator of ATX Hot Sauce, now in all 50 states and several retail outlets as well. So what we're going to do today is we're going to let this social media rock star chef walk us through 4 different sauces, and then I'll taste and we'll tell everyone why they should buy. You can give the science behind these, and then I'll make the simple recommendation. Go to atxhotsauce.com. All right,
I don't think anybody's heard the website.
Yeah, I know.
About you, Jeff, but it is atxhotsauce.com.
I'll say
I got that one right.
45 times, atxhotsauce.com. So let's do it.
I brought 4 flavors here, and we're going to test your palate today. Okay. And I only brought 4 because I didn't think you could handle 5 or 6.
Yes,
probably a smart move. Yeah. And so the first one we're going to try here, it's called Beet Heat. And just like the name implies, it has beets in it. It's made with red Fresno peppers. Red Fresnos are red peppers that are they're hotter than a jalapeno and a little bit less than a serrano. So not super hot here, just a lot of really good flavor. So we're going to start with this one, and then we're going to move up the chain.
Okay. I've had the Beet Heat, but okay.
Yeah, we're going to try it though.
It goes well with a cab. All right, Jeff's savoring Beet Heat.
I'll even do it with you, so that should be all right. Now remember, it is hot sauce.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's hot sauce. Trust me, man.
Wait, is that one hot to you?
No, a little.
Yeah. The great thing with the fermentation process is you get a bunch of the flavor right up front.
Yeah.
And then the heat comes, but then it dissipates pretty quickly, especially with the red Fresnos. This is not a very spicy one, but it is a very tasty one. Goes on great on sandwiches.
Beet Heat.
Beet Heat. B-E-E-T. Heat.
All right. Go to atxhotsauce.com.
That's right.
Why didn't people pick up your story? Why didn't the Trumpies of the world pick your story up and say, I told you Facebook hates me. They've got a bunch of Obama rejects there.
Why didn't the Trump people...
I'm not saying they're not objective people. I'm just saying the narrative works for the Ted Cruzes and the Donald Trumps of the world saying, this guy Simon Wood was on. He talked about the shadow government, and they're all Obama suck-ups.
Yeah. I mean, they're probably because there are also conservatives, like, people who are affiliated with Romney and other folks who are on the team. And and it's, I don't know, they're too nuanced anyways. Like they weren't like political partisans. We're talking about career State Department people, career DOJ people who worked at big law firms. Like it's much easier to demonize Zuckerberg if you're a Ted Cruz or whatever than it is to demonize like some like, really rigorous like Stanford law professor / DOJ prosecutor. Like like these people are serious and more impressive than like the average picture that you'd get of a Facebook. Like once you're there in the room, you realize like, okay, these people aren't going to solve any of these issues. These are unsolvable issues. Like someone's always going to disagree with them, but they're debating at a pretty high level. And so to answer your question about...
Right. Talk about if you're walking down the hall, there's that office right there. You look through the glass. Oh my gosh, there they are. And everybody who's ever been on Facebook, who's ever whined about being kicked off Facebook, now needs to know about this meeting and how they have a conclusion on any term.
Yeah, it happens. So the meeting in question that I went to, it happens once a week in the morning. And so there's this one meeting where everybody sits around a long kind of wooden, conference table, and then other people pipe in from other global Facebook offices, via Zoom or whatever. And that's when they debate sort of the big action items of the day. And then for the rest of the week, they branch off, they prepare reports, they research, they debate amongst themselves. So it's not like a constant, like just like never ending Socratic dialogue. But there is this thing once a week that is literally just like the elders or the knights of the round table deciding. And they decide. And, eventually some of this stuff, I guess, gets kicked up to Sheryl Sandberg or Zuckerberg, but they're deciding. I mean, I don't think that he or she overrules very often. So one of the interesting, I focused in large part on the issue of hate speech, and that is because it's a contested term. The U.S. law doesn't recognize it, unlike a lot of European countries. We don't ban hate speech in America because of our strong free speech, First Amendment protections. But Facebook is a global platform. Belgium, Italy, France, whatever, they all have hate speech laws. Then you have a lot of third world countries where it's the Wild West, and there's a ton of sort of ethnic tensions that get flamed on Facebook by what we often refer to as hate speech. So it's like globally just like a quagmire and a mess. 2, it's not something you can automate. So with arms, with violence, with nudity, even with some words, it's easy for algorithms now to catch it. I mean, almost all terroristic or nude content at this point is just immediately caught by Facebook's algorithms before, or that's not the right word exactly, but like it's a thing you can outsource to tech. Hate speech is super subjective. It's like, do you find this hateful? So they ended up over the course of, 2018 and 2019, crafting a set of rules. That's like, it's all in the article. It's at Vanity Fair. It's if you Google "men are scum," Facebook shadow government, Vanity Fair, Simon, it'll pop up. They create this whole kind of multi-tiered system that has to do with protected classes and sort of damaging speech. You have to be both things. You have to be like a protected class, and you also have to have speech that triggers one of their, sets off whatever. Men are scum was a really interesting thing because it reversed the usual dynamic in which left-wing people are saying that there's too much speech allowed. This was a case in which left-wing people were saying you're taking down speech that I want to leave up. And so after the Me Too movement of 2017,
because men and scum was that phrase was at the center of this debate. Somebody somewhere, some soccer mom posted "men are scum." Boom.
It wasn't a soccer mom. It was a collection of feminist activists, namely comedians, who were posting like their own stories of sexual harassment or sexual misconduct, along with the hashtag "men are scum." Facebook started taking it down. They were super outraged about it because these were their stories, and so a lot of them banded together and created a group where they would like mass kind of like post "men are scum," and they still all got taken down. And what happened was that male as a gender, was a protected class. Scum was seen as a dehumanizing word. Scum, the same way if you used shit or piss or I don't know, whatever, something you'd use to sort of try to belittle someone, dehumanize them, compare them to a bodily fluid or whatever. So immediately, like it set it off. Now they were saying like "men are scum" is fine because men are scum. If men had been saying "women are scum," there would have been no problem in that cohort. So essentially what it boiled down to was the shadow government had to make a decision of, are we going to try to apply a neutral view of the world in which both genders are treated equally and hate speech against both genders is prohibited, or are we going to tip the scales a bit and protect women more than we protect men online? Because historically, there have probably been more male scumbags than female scumbags, and that's the debate, which doubles as a debate, the kind of debates we have every day.
So does somebody sitting in this room, again, you're walking down the hall with a cup of coffee and you go, oh, there they are, the shadow government. And somebody at the head of the table says, Sarah, men are scum. Make your case. Sarah goes off, men are scum. What, I had a date last night and they are scum. Bob, make your case. No, we got to leave that up there. Is that how it goes? No. And then it goes around the table, then finally somebody, the elder, makes a decision. That's it, men are scum is gone.
No, it's slightly more deliberative. What happens is what they did is that they commissioned a smaller group of people to come up with solutions to this issue. And so a smaller subgroup presented 4 potential solutions to the issue, and they presented them in a PowerPoint. And it was like, it ranged from like super permissive, everything is allowed, to super narrow, it's the opposite. It's like, whatever, the gamut. They did 4 options, which ran the gamut. And by the end of my article, I explain what decision they reached. I'm not going to give it away because I want people to go click on it. But they reached a decision, and yes, essentially it is the leader of the policy team, whose name is Monica Bickert. She's a Stanford law professor. She was the DOJ prosecutor I was talking about. And she worked in the Obama, but also the George W. Bush administration. She's a career serious bureaucrat, but also has a strong interest in speech, strong interest in this sort of thing. And she ultimately is the one who's going to make that decision. And in this case, I think made the decision about where to go. But it is mostly collaborative. I mean, she's soliciting feedback. I don't think it's always like show of hands, but I think sometimes, it's like if she can get a consensus.
And so then then they come to a conclusion, put it into written form, and then send it out the door to whomever. And then that's our constitutional amendment on words today or this week or this month.
Exactly.
Wow. That is immensely powerful. I mean, it's the most powerful, I say all the time on my show, it's the most powerful media company ever created.
Yeah.
It's immensely powerful and immensely complicated. I mean, Facebook is blamed for everything now, of course. So are we to believe that, our Mark Zuckerberg, which your description of him was, I can't remember what you said about him. He is caught up between being celebrity and being a nerd and being a complicated figure all in one, right? I mean, but we're to believe that Mark Zuckerberg never strolls by, hey, just checking in on you guys, and goes in the room. He has no access to them or no power over them whatsoever.
No, he definitely would. If Mark Zuckerberg wanted to just like overrule them, I'm sure he could. But my strong sense is that there are so many minute policy decisions being made every day at Facebook that like it's just not what he's bothering with. But on big PR issues, he is like, on the decision of whether to ban Trump from Facebook after the Capitol riots of January 6th, like Zuckerberg is essentially making that decision. Like if it's a huge decision, like it's just going straight up the pole.
Okay. But did this group, did the shadow government or whatever their official term is at the office, did they have any say over banning Trump?
That's a good question. I wasn't in the room. And I haven't reported much on this ever since I hung out with them. I have no idea. I am sure it was, talk about the 3 branches of government. Here's what happened. Facebook has a whole nother solution now, which was just in the works when I was there. When I was there, they were developing their 3rd branch, their judicial branch. So they had Zuckerberg, they had the legislative branch, the shadow government, and they were kind of beta testing the Supreme Court. Now they have a Supreme Court. Facebook has a group of like 50 judges, essentially, that are not Facebook employees, that are paid by a trust, that are based all around the world, former judges, former journalists, former human rights activists, you name it, who now rule on these issues. And so what they do is they're essentially like an appellate court. So when Zuckerberg or whoever ended up making the decision to ban Trump from Facebook ruled, they kicked that to the Supreme Court now to make sure that it passes muster. And so there's now a check on the shadow government and on Zuckerberg to see if actually the Constitution was deemed like correct in the eyes of this judicial branch. So there's now a Supreme Court which exists, and the court ended up ratifying, a panel of that court I don't know, a few months ago, ended up ratifying the decision to ban Trump from Facebook.
Which I don't agree with, but I mean, I guess it's a private company, they can own it, and they have owned it.
Yeah.
Does Twitter? I mean, if other platforms who are constantly, I mean, let's be honest, there is no perfect answer. You're not. It's impossible to have a perfect answer. Some would argue having just letting the platform go, but that's not a good business model. Do other platforms now, are they trying this? If they, Zuckerberg talked to Jack Dorsey, and Dorsey says, yeah, Trump's on my ass all the time. What are we going to do? Yeah, I need him to do all these committees and judges.
Yeah.
Is this spreading?
My sense is Twitter has way less of an infrastructure. It's smaller. It doesn't have as much of a global reach. My sense is that there is a policy team at Twitter, but I don't think it's anywhere near as like developed as the Facebook one. And I think they end up like putting a lot of fires out, just kind of like ad hoc. I think it's also like a lot of conservative listeners may disagree with this, but I think it's generally more permissive than Facebook is. I think there are fewer rules, is my sense. But Twitter does not have a Supreme Court. I mean, the Facebook thing is new in human history. I mean, there's never been a website before that kicks it out to like an external body.
Right, but if you take kicking Trump off, or I mean, even the whole everybody has that crazy uncle who posts all kinds of conspiracy. Even let's just forget Trump. Let's just use the anti-vax thing. At some point, that shadow government, I know they say they're just about words and the law, but this is a privately run, it's a publicly traded company, but it's a private business that I can't imagine for a single second that decisions about content aren't affected by decisions about the business. I mean, I don't want to scare a bunch of 35-year-old women off my platform because I want Johnson & Johnson to advertise, so I can't let F-bombs by crazy uncles on there. How do they not, or if they do, how can anyone possibly believe for a second that committee is so autonomous, they have nothing to do with the business?
Yeah, it's a good question. Of course, there are pressures. I think that it's likely that you're right about a lot of the quote misinformation and like bullshit. Like, why would a lot of the bullshit travels well, and they don't want to. I don't think Facebook at the very top has any real desire economically, but also philosophically to tamp down the bullshit, because
the most traded story was from like last January, and it was some kind of anti-vax BS, and it was by far the most shared story.
Yeah. I think there are economic pressures to just let that flow. And I think they're also coming from a perspective of kind of like not quite free speech absolutism, but a kind of combo of like Silicon Valley libertarianism meets like Obama liberalism, which tends towards free speech, right? They're not about sort of restricting. And so there's a way in which their philosophy dovetails with the economic incentives to basically let stuff proliferate. Sorry. But there's a counterpoint here. On hate speech, it's different. And they make a convincing argument. I find this convincing, that the more like truly like hateful stuff on the platform, the more you will drive people away. Yeah. Nobody likes to be attacked. Nobody likes to feel like their personal, there have been studies that have shown that people will migrate to other platforms because they feel their feelings are hurt, or they're like, this isn't for me, I feel attacked. That's different from the BS. I think the BS people love, it riles them up, it's fun. It's like a tabloid, right? It's like the reason why people prefer reading tabloids to reading boring broadsheet newspapers. On the hate speech stuff, I do think actually they have an economic incentive to get rid of it, the same way they do like violent content, sort of like graphic nudity. It's clear there's a certain line that if you cross, it's going to drive users away. I don't think that line exists on the bullshit. Yeah.
So is it a fair? Do they own it? Because anti-vax stuff is, I mean, Joe Biden, I know he tried to walk it back, but the guy, not the president of the United States, not long ago said they're killing people. So you can't hide from the anti-vax matters. So you're suggesting that they're telling the world we care about the anti-vax message, but they're really behind closed doors winking at this group saying, but everybody digs it.
Probably A. B, like they have these fact checker bubbles that'll pop up, right? Like some like disputed piece from some like stupid website will come up and it'll say like, this has been fact checked, blah, blah, blah. The problem is that like, if you're already an anti-vaxxer, you're not going to believe a Facebook fact checker. Like you're going to see fact checker and be like, oh, that's more like liberal propaganda or whatever. So like, it doesn't matter in a way. I also think that like, I do think that there's a slippery slope. Like personally, I wish there were way less anti-vax bullshit out there. I wish we had more vaccinated people in the country. But I also think there's a slippery slope where like what counts as disinformation? I mean, a year ago, a lot of people were saying like, a lot of folks in sort of right-wing media were talking about like, oh, did the virus leak from a lab? And a lot of people in liberal media were like, no way, that's bullshit. That's like a conspiracy theory. Then all of a sudden, like temperatures cooled a bit, Trump was out of office, and new research suggested, hey, maybe it did come out of a lab. Maybe they were doing gain of function research and it escaped. Like we still don't know, who knows? But once you start labeling something misinformation, there is a kind of like censorious trend to it. And you can end up shutting down something that maybe was true, but at the time didn't look true. I don't think that's a danger with anti-vax stuff. Like these vaccines work. Like we have a pandemic of the unvaccinated right now. Vaccinated people aren't getting hospitalized, not to get into that whole issue.
Right.
At the same time, if Facebook becomes the person who at Facebook then is deciding what's rumor, what's gossip, what's satire, what's truth.
Well, does all that stuff that you just mentioned, which everybody we'd be yelling at each other around a bar stool or a bar, what is right, what is wrong. I mean, that's legit. Yeah. That's fair, legitimate debate. But does anything you just said seep into that room? I mean, does somebody, tell you, Simon, the truth of the matter is, I don't know why we're cracking down on that stuff. I mean, I kind of believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's total viewpoint diversity in there. I mean, not total. Like I would say there's probably not a lot of MAGA hat people in that room, but there are some. I don't want to call them token, but there are some like Republicans in the room to make sure there's viewpoint diversity. I think they do at least when I was there, they did a pretty good job of fostering robust debate. Yeah, of course. That's the kind of debate they're having. And there were closed doors that I didn't get behind. And I'm sure
why did they do that? I mean, in this world now why did they talk to you? And why would they allow, I've never read, no one's ever read, I didn't know any of those people didn't know any of this stuff. We knew there was debate about a shadow government, but you're now saying there really is this thing. There they are, they're behind the glass. And that's a dangerous thing to get out. I mean,
it is, but
I wouldn't want someone to know.
I think it's, well, maybe though, but what's the alternative? Just like Zuckerberg in his throne, like clicking buttons? Like, I think they thought if people know that there's a deliberative body that's thoughtfully trying to work through these impossible issues, that's better than the usual thing, which is like, oh, freaking Zuckerberg, like banned me from the platform again. Like, who's this nerd king to tell me like, what I can say and not say? Like, I think they were at their wits' end because they realized that blocking people, I had a very smart PR handler who saw something that a lot of PR people don't see, which is if you block access, it is going to make a reporter's antennae pop up and think, ooh, what are they trying to hide from me? If you let someone in, it suggests even subliminally, like we have less to hide than you think, and it can disarm. So I have to work against that instinct. I got to be on guard. I've got to report critically. But once I'm in there, I think they realize like they're going to see that these people, it's not just Zuckerberg and Sandberg who are like steepling their fingers and cackling and collecting checks. Like there are people trying to solve these issues. And again, I think they're always going to fail. I think in a way, just like, I don't know, like the politics always fails in the sense that no one's always happy.
Yeah. No, it's legitimate. It's an impossible equation. I mean, I don't know. I get frustrated
with people to know.
Yeah.
I think it's better for people to know, actually from their perspective, it's better for people to know that like they're debating it rather than making executive decisions by fiat.
Yeah.
Even if, they often come down on the wrong.
No, I get that. I guess in this day and time where every knucklehead wants to find out who's blocking me, it's not firing off a mean email, it's chasing them down and shooting them. It's just, it's a more dangerous world when you pull the curtain back. There are lunatics out there that no longer just complain, they come to kill you. That was my thinking. I wouldn't, I mean, I don't know if I'd go there. All right, it's pretty fat. It's in Vanity Fair, right?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, thanks for doing this again.
Yeah, do it again soon. Talk to you later.
Bet. All right.
From the Hot Pie Media Studios in Austin, Texas, it's the Jeff Ward Show. Listen at jeffwardshow.com.